Good morning. It's 10:30, so let's get started. Thank you for joining us today for the webinar, Stormwater, Ponds, Pollution, and You. I'm Teresa Monson with the St. Johns River Water Management District, and I'm serving as moderator for today's webinar. Our presenter is Dr. Jennifer Mitchell, who is responsible for educational outreach for the district. She holds a doctorate in forest ecology from Auburn University, and she's been with the district for 3 years. This is the fourth in our webinar series about the work of the St. Johns River Water Management District and how individuals can help to protect our water resources. Today's webinar is being recorded and will be made available on the district's website, www.sjrwmd.com. We are all working in pretty extraordinary times, so during the presentation and comments, you may hear background noises such as pets or children. Thank you in advance for understanding and for your patience. I would like to remind everyone that they will be on mute throughout the presentation. Feel free to type questions in the question box during the presentation. We will respond to as many as possible during a question and answer period at the end of Dr. Mitchell's presentation. If we don't get to your question during the meeting, we will reach out to you afterward and get you an answer. Now, please join me in welcoming Dr. Mitchell.
Good morning, and thank you so much, Teresa, and thank you all for coming and attending this today. I hope that everybody gains a little bit more about stormwater and is excited to learn about stormwater and ways that you can help with water quality, as well as ways that the district is helping to look at water quality in terms of stormwater and remediation of that. To start with, I want to have a quick poll. I will have a few of these throughout the presentation, but I want to get an idea of your knowledge of the St. Johns River Water Management District. Do you work with us regularly? Do you get outside on district lands? Do you follow us on water news or social media? Or have you been participating in the webinars and learning about the district? Or you're not sure who we are, but you're really excited about stormwater and learning more about the district. So we'll wait just a second and let folks respond. And with this one, you are actually able to select multiple answers. Wonderful. We have a good number of folks that have voted, and let's see what those results show. So a whole lot of folks that work with us regularly, that's always good to hear. People who get outside on district lands, and some that are following us on water news and social media, and probably how you heard about this webinar. So we're really glad that you decided to tune in with us today, and I'm glad to see those that are enjoying learning more about the district. For those of you who are less familiar with the district, we are one of the 5 water management districts across the state of Florida. Our district covers all or portions of 18 counties, and it's the entire watershed of the St. Johns River. And so that means that all of our area is going to make its way into the St. Johns River or those coastal rivers. And then we also have Baker and Nassau County that go into the St. Mary's River. So it's really important that we understand this concept that all of our water here in Florida is connected, and that the St. Johns River Water Management District is working through our core missions. And those are water supply, water quality, flood protection, and our natural systems, to ensure that we have enough water for us, for our natural systems, and for us into the future, because we are all really dependent on water, whether that be individuals, our homes, our businesses, and the organisms that live here within the district, plants and animals. So it's really important that we understand that we play a crucial role as individuals in helping to protect water quality, as well as our communities having a responsibility. So if we think about the concept of stormwater, it will fall under two at least of the core missions of the district. And I hope that you will all tune in to our June webinars, where we each week are going to be looking at one of the core missions each week. And our June 4th webinar, we will have our Executive Director, Dr. Ann Shortell, talking to us about water supply. So I hope that you will join us for that, as well as the other webinars that we have going on. When we think about stormwater, it is important to remember that at once Florida was mostly vegetated and had systems such as this. And with our development of it and conversions of these pervious systems, so that means the water can soak through the ground, to things where we have roofs, where we want them to be impervious. We don't want that water going through them, especially when it rains. That would not be beneficial. And we have our roads and our streets. It is creating that increased stormwater. That stormwater, as it moves off of our roofs, down our gutters, into our driveways, it's going to pick up the things that it comes in contact with. It picks up the oils potentially, or the things that may have come from our cars. It can pick up that brake dust, fertilizers from our yards if they have accidentally been spilled on our driveway, and it moves through the system that we've created down our streets, picking up anything that gets in its way, and then they go down our storm drains. Those storm drains lead to our stormwater ponds in our communities. These stormwater ponds act as a location for that water to sit. They act to allow time to allow those sediments to fall out of the water, because most of our rainfall events here in Florida are 1 inch or less. And so those are going to go into these stormwater ponds and either slowly soak down into the ground, or they may slowly drain into a natural water body. But then there is this connection between our stormwater ponds and our local creeks and into our lakes and rivers. So it's really important we remember that although we may think the stormwater pond in our backyard is totally separate and a great ways away from the St. Johns River or the nearest lake nearby, it is a lot closer than we may be thinking. And so again, some of those pollutants that stormwater can contain are everything from fertilizers that we might use in our garden, pet wastes, fertilizers, herbicides, and the grass clippings. And so it's all of these things that can contribute to increasing the amount of nutrients that are in our water bodies. And nutrients are the greatest concern. And it's not that there's a single point where these nutrients are coming in, but a lot of various places across the entire watershed, across the entire district. So in my case specifically, I live in a neighborhood with stormwater ponds. We have several of them within our neighborhood. During large rain events, those waters would go off into a nearby creek and out into the St. Johns. But it's really important to remember that not only do we have the stormwater ponds within my neighborhood, there are many neighborhoods in my immediate vicinity that all have stormwater structures, all have yards that are being landscaped, all have those roads that people are driving on with brake dust and all of that. So it's really important that the things that we are doing within our own communities have an impact on the ultimate receiving water body of the St. Johns River, of our nearby lakes. And so it is all connected. And there are lots of levels of individuals and groups working together to address water quality and stormwater. So it is a collaborative effort that everyone from your local government, on here you see Alachua County. In the past, I worked at Alachua County, and so I've worked with them on some of their social marketing, utilizing this, getting everyone to think about the behavior changes that we're able to do, such as picking up our pet waste, such as blowing our grass clippings back on the street, so that we have those positive impacts. Because there's the local government, there's the water management districts working together, as well as the Department of Environmental Protection, that it is also a responsibility of all of the individuals to help with those changes. So if we think about how water quality is impacted, it is important to remember that all of our different land uses, so our neighborhoods are going to have a different type of pollution that might come into them, rather than our very urban areas, rather than golf courses. So there are different places that pollution can come from, and that type might be different. So the way that we're going to address it is going to be different. So in your neighborhood, have you noticed any of these type of systems, either a wet stormwater pond, a dry stormwater pond, or you haven't noticed one of these in your neighborhood. So I'm launching that poll. So what type of stormwater system have you noticed in your community? The type of stormwater system may indicate whether you're in an area where there is a lot of recharge or where that water table is much deeper in the ground if you have those dry stormwater basins. So a wet stormwater pond, I live up in the Jacksonville area, and most of our stormwater ponds are those wet basins because the water table is a lot higher in our area. So we see that here we have a lot of folks with those wet stormwater ponds, a good number of folks that have noticed dry ponds, and some that may have not noticed either. Either they're in areas where they're more rural or potentially in older communities. Those older communities, there was not the stormwater infrastructure within them. So again, why is it that we are concerned about stormwater, about those nutrients that are contained within that stormwater, and why do we go to the effort to build stormwater systems? And that is because nutrients and excess nutrients, so when there are too much nitrogen or fertilizer, we can have an imbalance in the ecosystem, and we can get these harmful algal blooms. We can get algal blooms in general. So there are a lot of different terms or a lot of different types of algae. So that's an important consideration to have in mind. But it's when we get too much nutrients and too much algae that we can have major impacts and major shifts in the entire river or lake ecosystems. So that can be really harmful to the organisms that live there. And ultimately, again, remember that stormwater has can contain a lot of nutrients. Water, when it moves very, very rapidly, and it's really powerful. I think one of the best ways that I have internalized how powerful water can be is I've helped with several cleanups. And one of the cleanups, we actually found a bowling ball in this wetland area. And so to be able to think about the fact that a bowling ball was picked up and moved out into this wetland by the power of water, it is really important to remember that there is that power. So one of the reasons and one of the benefits of stormwater ponds and creating these stormwater ponds with new developments and with roads that are occurring and expanding is that it helps to prevent the problem that we notice on the left, in the left picture, that erosion or the bank channel erosion. So the creeks becoming further away from those floodplains. So when we have a lot of water moving really quickly to the creeks, it causes more erosion. And so there can also be that erosion problem. Then we also have potential for flood protection. So those downstream areas that are receiving that water really rapidly could get flooded. We also have water quality protections that result from creating our stormwater ponds. So what can you do in your neighborhood, in your home, in your yard? You can do things like, if you live on water, make sure that you are protecting and ensuring that 25-foot fertilizer-free zone. You also want to check with your local governments of what your fertilizer restrictions might be, what those ordinances are. Some have summer bans, some do not have fertilizer ordinances. So make sure you're following the proper recommendations for that fertilizer if you are applying it. Test your soil, make sure your soil is indicating that you need those nutrients for your plants. Again, you want to make sure you're keeping those grass clippings off of the street, so blow them back into your yard, let them break down and release those nutrients into your grass. And pick up pet waste. It has fecal coliform as well as nutrients that's contained in it. And if you are fertilizing yourself as well as applying it properly, make sure you're also sweeping up any of that granular fertilizer if it does fall on the driveway. So if you do live in a neighborhood that has stormwater infrastructure, you probably already realize this, but it is your entire community's responsibility to maintain it. And so even if you do not live on the water body, your HOA or your community is responsible for the proper maintenance of these systems. And so part of your company's responsibility is that maintenance and operation of those stormwater ponds. So it's important that, especially as we are entering hurricane season, that some of these maintenance action items be conducted prior to going into hurricane season, because it's a lot easier to do some of this maintenance when water levels are lower than when they're higher and you notice that there are problems. So repairing eroded slopes. One reason that we get eroded slopes is that if we kill all of the plants, or if we even have an area of that is lacking of plants, then as that water level moves up and down in our stormwater ponds, we can cause that erosion to occur. Plants are one of my best friends, and they do the best job of helping us with holding that soil in place, with taking up the nutrients that are both in the water, as the standing water of your stormwater pond, as well as the water that's going to move over land into that stormwater pond. So they do a great job of helping with our stormwater systems. Maybe you've noticed, or you live in a community or a city, local government that has street sweepers. Those street sweepers are trying to keep this from occurring. They're working to make sure that any of the leaves, the litter, are not making it down those storm drains. So if you live in a neighborhood that doesn't have street sweepers, maybe you organize your community to get out and do a maintenance project where you're pulling up all of this litter debris, or that you're working with your HOA and that board to make sure that that is being addressed, and so that those leaves and the nutrients that they contain aren't getting into our water bodies. Also, another thing that's really important is that, especially as we're entering hurricane season, for these outfall structures, or the places where the water is going to leave the pond when it gets really high, you want to make sure that those are not clogged with excess vegetation or woody debris. So fixing those and maintaining them when the water levels are low is a lot easier. And again, you can maybe work with your neighborhood or community to plant a littoral zone. You want to make sure that you are realizing that these are plants, so there will be a level of maintenance required, and you don't want it to take over the entire pond so that you no longer have that storage capability within your pond. But this littoral zone and the riparian, the buffer around your pond, is going to really help with decreasing those nutrients making their way into the pond. So what are some of the tools that you can utilize? So we have some information on our website, as well as I mentioned the Florida Friendly Landscaping. They have been having some really wonderful webinars, as well as resources on their website. There is the Green Industries Best Management training. That's another option. And to remember that engaging with both your yard and your landscaper, if you hire someone, or if you're doing it yourself, understanding that connection between your yard and the waters all around it, that there is that direct connection. So those are some of the ways that individuals, that we all in our own yards, in our own lives, can have an impact on our water quality. So let's talk real quickly about some of the things that the district is doing. I have two specific projects that the district has helped with in their cost share funding. And one of those is a stormwater pond down in Sebastian. And it was a collaboration between the St. Johns River Water Management District and the city of Sebastian. And it had direct positive impacts to the Indian River Lagoon. This stormwater pond allows for increased habitat. As you can tell here, there's lots of extra wetland created. Wetlands and stormwater and plants, again, there's that interconnection between improving water quality and providing habitat whenever we can create these kind of systems. And so this is taking water from a 13-acre watershed. It provides it with both flood protection and water quality improvements. And there's an estimated 56% nitrogen reduction from the creation of this stormwater park. and an 83% drop in that phosphorus. So we really can see positive impacts through creating these stormwater systems in areas that may not have had them when they were originally developed. Another example of this regional approach is the regional stormwater treatment areas in the Tri-County Ag area. And so in the Flagler, Putnam, and St. Johns County, there is a lot of agriculture. And so one of the ways that we have been collaborating to improve the water quality that makes its way into the St. Johns River is by taking this approach. At this Deep Creek West location, we created this large stormwater pond similar to what you would see in your neighborhood. And this was a project along with the Department of Transportation. And that water flows into this. At times of high rain event, water from the nearby agricultural areas can flow into this system. It goes into the stormwater pond and then over into a created wetland system, again, creating opportunity for water quality improvement. So I hope that these examples of partnerships that the district is doing, ways that you are able to engage, get you really thinking about what you can do and that connection between our choices with our water bodies. And to wrap it up, I want to get one more poll of what is the new action that you're going to take to reduce your inputs. Are you able to talk with your neighbor and maybe get your whole neighborhood doing something? Making sure you're fertilizing appropriately if you are fertilizing, utilizing the resources that are available. Florida Friendly Landscaping is a really tremendously valuable resource that is available. Talk to your company, your lawn company. And again, there is that connection between water, our irrigation, and our landscapes and our water bodies that are receiving. So wait 1 second and feel free again to type those questions in that you may have, and we will get to those. Let's see what everybody is going to do with their new activities. Wonderful. I love to see this no overwatering, and based on last week's webinar, which is available, it was recorded and is available on our website, you can find out how to dial in your irrigation. So wonderful. So Teresa, are you still there?
I am still here. Thank you, Dr. Mitchell. Let's get to our questions. We have a question. Here's the first one. This one came in early too. What actions are needed to reuse stormwater and or waste groundwater, and what are the safety issues?
So that is a great question, because stormwater can be a tremendously valuable opportunity of an alternative water supply. So there are some areas in our district where those stormwater ponds are able to be utilized for irrigation. And so that when those stormwater ponds are permitted, they would have that as a permitted use of that stormwater pond. So that's one really important consideration. And so that would need to have a filter on it to filter out the sediment so that it's not clogging the irrigation system. And so that would be one form of reuse. Another type of reuse, if we're thinking into that drinking water, it would have to go to a drinking water treatment facility to undergo that high level of treatment that would be necessary for being sent out through our municipal water supply.
Next question is, some golf courses use stormwater ponds as an irrigation source. What is your opinion on lining or having the ponds unlined?
So it wouldn't be an opinion. It would be what the function and what that permitted purpose of the system is. And so there are some ponds that are permitted to be lined so that that water is not soaking down through the sands and escaping, so that it is able to be utilized for irrigation. But in other areas, they are designed so that that water can move down through the ground and lower in level so that there is that storage capacity. So it really depends on what the purpose of that stormwater pond is.
Okay, we got this question a couple of times. One is, what plants would you recommend for implementing a littoral zone area? A similar question is, what plants should I avoid having in my stormwater pond?
So that's a really great question. So one that is always one of my go-tos and if you want this in a written form, we do have this information on our website, and I will, when I send out the follow-up email, I will make sure I include that. Plants that you would like to have are plants that are not going to grow rapidly and ones that are not going to fill in the pond. However, I did mention that they are plants, and so we don't want to think that just because we plant them, then they're maintenance free. So plants that are good in terms of not growing really rapidly are going to be things like pickerel weed, Sagittaria or duck potato. They have lots of different common names. You can even introduce iris, and it's going to be in that shallow area where the water level is, the root zone is flooded, but they're not under 2 feet of water. And some of the plants that you really want to make sure you avoid, and that if you do have a lakefront property that you are managing through the proper ways, would be things like cattails. Some cattails might be okay if you're managing them, but cattails can take over an entire stormwater pond really rapidly, and then you lose that storage capability. So it's best to keep those out. The other thing that you really want to make sure that isn't getting in is like water hyacinth, other invasive plants. So those you would want to make sure that you are working with the appropriate entities to keep those out. And again, that list of plants is on our website.
Okay. One attendee says the pond behind their house has cattails. Should they be removed? And who is responsible for it?
So depending on how much cattails there are, and if your stormwater pond still has that storage capability, then they would not, if it has the storage capability, you wouldn't have to remove them. However, they do die at the end of the season and release their nutrients. And it would be your neighborhood, if that's the pond behind you that you're talking about, that would be responsible for hiring someone to remove those. So it is a community's responsibility to maintain the stormwater ponds within them.
Okay. Another attendee says kids fish in their neighborhood pond. Is it catch and release, or can they take those fish home, maybe eat them, and then in parentheses, I hope not?
Oh, absolutely not. So there are a lot of instances of stormwater ponds being stocked with fish because they do provide a good opportunity for habitat, but it is really important to not eat those fish because, again, those water bodies are receiving potentially lots of heavy metals and oils, and the fish that you might be collecting are going to be bioaccumulators, so they would have a lot of that within their body. So you definitely do not want to eat any of the things that are caught in that pond. In the same way, I always approach our stormwater ponds with a little bit of caution in terms of even being around the edges and looking for different organisms. I do that with my kids, but I always make sure we wash our hands really thoroughly because, again, they are a place that fecal coliform can collect.
Okay, we are right at 11 a.m. We want to thank you for your participation. If we did not get to your question, and we did not get to all of them, we will reach out to you individually. Our next educational webinar will be next Thursday, May 28th, beginning at 10:30 a.m. And Dr. Mitchell will have a special guest, Rob Matson, with the district, who is going to talk about springs. That registration link will be available on our website at www.sjrwmd. And I want to also mention that in 2 weeks from today, Our executive director, Dr. Ann Shortell, will be joining Jennifer to talk about water supply. We hope you will join us. Thank you again. And again, we will get back to you individually if we did not get to your question this morning. Jen?
Thank you so much. I appreciate you all today.